It's a great honor to have this short interview with Benjamin Davis. Benjamin Davis is the strategic program leader on rural poverty reduction at the FAO. He's based in Rome. He's one of the professors here at the Agrarian South Training Institute in Zimbabwe, Harare. Thank you for talking to me, Benjamin.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Let me start by asking you, so FAO is one of the actors involved in the Agrarian South Training Institute that is taking place in Harare, as I said. So why is it essential for the FAO to be involved in the training of scholars and researchers from the Global South?
It's fundamental for FAO because, the researchers, the future researchers, the students now, play a critical role in each of the countries of origin, from where they're from, in terms of generating evidence, in terms of discussing ideas, in terms of participating in the ongoing debates and political discussions and policy discussions around dealing with agrarian issues and issues of rural development. Okay? And so it's fundamental for FAO to engage not only with academics from the United States, from Europe, but also from those researchers who are really participating and really working in the daily discussion and research ongoing on what are the key issues in development.
One of your lectures was on the Sustainable Development Goals. So you were talking to the students about the role the FAO plays in supporting member states in attaining the goals, right? What went wrong with the Millennium Development Goals?
I'm not sure if it's a question as to what went wrong, right? It's more the Millennium Development Goals responded to a moment, to a certain objective, right? The period of the MDGs ended, right? And the SDGs really represent a totally different approach to the global agenda on development, right? And so it's not as much what went wrong, but rather what could be done a lot better and what would really respond to the needs of developing countries rather than much more of a bottom-up approach in terms of the member countries rather than the MDGs, which was a bit more of a top-down approach, let's say.
So how to understand the Sustainable Development Goals in the context of the global capitalism? How can you how applicable they are in countries where their economic structure is dependent on how the economic and capitalist forces globally operate?
Right. Well, that's the rub, and that's the difficult issue, no? Because the Sustainable Development Goals don't really explicitly address structural issues, I would say. They do almost in an indirect way, right? And I think the opportunity that the SDGs offer is that, well, first of all, they're processes that need to be, they're implemented at the country level, right? And it's at the country level where the interpretation and the selection of which goals the country will focus on, but really the interpretation of what the goal means for a given country, right? And so I think the overall goals reflect kind of general ideals on the part of humanity, let's say, right, in terms of a world without hunger, a world without poverty. It does give some specific policy guidelines, right, but not necessarily guidelines that will get to, that'll address the structural issues, right. But I think it does afford the opportunity within countries to have discussion around, okay, well, this really is our objective, right? What is it going to take for us in order to reach that? And that's where you can get into at least some of the political discussion around some of these more fundamental issues. And so that's why it's so crucial to bring in civil society, producer organizations, organized civil society, to participate in these discussions along with government and researchers, etc.
One of the proposals that actually came from popular movements is the proposal of agroecology and food sovereignty. According to those movements, and the leading one is La Via Campesina, is that agroecology and food sovereignty will not only solve the hunger and malnutrition problem, but also will be a key kind of strategic paradigms to also solve other crises that the world is facing today. How does the FAO see the proposals of agroecology and food sovereignty?
In terms of agroecology, it's actually an important area of emphasis of FAO. And this is not only in terms of many declarations by senior management, by the Director General himself, and many of kind of the most important publications of the organization. There's also a unit dedicated to agroecology within the organization now. And so it is recognized as an important approach in terms of bringing about sustainable agriculture. Now there is a whole diversity of opinions as to, and even within agroecology itself, there's diversity of opinions in terms of what it is and what it isn't in different approaches. And so there is debate at FAO in terms of the role of agroecology within FAO's broader sustainable agricultural framework, right? And the role it can play. Now, FAO itself doesn't say that agroecology is the way to go, right? It offers it as an instrument that if countries and if different civil society actors want to go their way, it'll provide the technical assistance in that direction. Because FAO, in some of these, let's say, issues of big discussion, whether they be GMOs or whether they be agroecology, it doesn't have one official position, right? It leaves that decision to the member countries, but provides information and approaches to help the country to implement the way it wants to go. Food sovereignty, I would say, is a bit more, doesn't have necessarily, there's a bit more discussion, I would say, in terms of what is the role of food sovereignty. Now, I think after we saw the food price crisis of the late 2000s, I think a lot more attention has been given to the need for countries to have, for food sovereignty and to be a little less trustful of particularly the international markets in terms of being able to access food, particularly in times of crisis and trouble, right? And so because of that crisis, I think the idea and the role of food sovereignty has gained a bit more legitimacy, let's say. And so it's part of the discussion, but it isn't. There's no official position, let's say, at FAO on food sovereignty.
Another lecture that you gave at the Institute has to do with migration, right? Which is now one of the burning issues that concerns UN agencies like the FAO. How do you see the future of human mobility in the coming years, let's say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there always will be human mobility, right? I mean, it's part of the way societies work, basically, right? And the way economies work. I think there are a number of issues as we go into the future where the different processes of migration need attention by the international community, right? Not only in terms of kind of the most recent crisis in Europe, because there's a lot of human rights issues, right? In terms of the rights of people to be able to move, to be able to look for better economic opportunities, and it really requires a solution at the level of governments and countries to deal with some of these critical issues and some of these recent crises. Now, I think issues like climate change, issues around, and other issues having to do with economic policies and economic slowdowns and some of the crises ongoing in countries, as we go into the future, combined with the increasing population growth, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, it's going to become more and more of an issue, right? As people are going to be needing, as the rural areas of Africa aren't able to provide necessarily the jobs for all the people that will be there and will need to move to other areas. And so it's a solution that, by definition, the United Nations needs to play a role in terms of bringing countries together. it's funny, migration tends to go up and down in terms of crises, right? I would say if we didn't have the crisis in Syria right now, the issue of migration perhaps wouldn't be as much on everyone's agenda, right? But it's going to be building up in any case, right? And so I think it served to at least heighten sensibility and focus now. And I think the UN does play a role in terms of. What we need to be careful, though, is that we represent and we bring together the ideas not just of the wealthier countries that are on the receiving end, but also the countries that are actually generating a lot of the migration, and also the countries that are in between in terms of transport. And so it's going to continue to be a big issue that we need to address.
Reacting to your lecture, Professor Praveen Jha said that the flows of migration historically were always organically connected to the capitalist accumulation agenda, right? Would you read it that way today?
Well, we live in a world of capitalism, right? So how else can you? He made a number of points, right? Part of it, I think you need to separate between colonization, colonizers, and migrants, right? The two of them often sometimes come together, right? But I think it's obvious. I mean, much migration is due to economic reasons, right? And it's the economic growth and how different countries develop and kind of different countries specialize and where opportunities arise, which obviously these are capitalist countries. They respond to a capitalist logic, right? And so it's hard to argue when they're all capitalist countries, right? That is the dominant economic paradigm in the world.
Benjamin, thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
I had you actually.
My pleasure.
Thank you.